Today's coach guest on the coaching podcast is Cara-Lyn Giovanniello. She's the CEO and founder of CLG Coaching and Consulting. That alone stands for confidence, leadership, and growth, something we all strive for. She's a strategic thinker with a human lens. She helps leaders thrive in fast-moving, high-pressure environments through the art of learned intelligence, which is a practical approach that blends strategy, emotional intelligence, and relationships to drive clarity, adaptability, and intentional leadership. This season of the coaching podcast is brought to you by SAM, the AI tool built for the coaching world. If you're a coach, SAM takes the stress out of marketing so you can spend more time doing what you love, coaching. And if you're looking for a coach, think of SAM as a matchmaking service without the romance, helping you find the right coach at the right time. Discover how simple it can be at trysam.ai. G'day everybody and welcome to the coaching podcast. Today, as I've already just spoken about Cara-Lyn's amazing introduction, I want you all to know she's a giver. And for those of you who don't know, San Fran is SF team. So to all my listeners out there, it's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn very quickly. Failure is learning. So look, we're going to kick it off. Cara-Lyn, welcome to the show. And what are your thoughts on this quote? The art of communication is the language of leadership. Take it away.
Oh, well, I mean, right away, you just picked the best quote for me to start out with. My basis of understanding for relationship intelligence is all around communication and making sure that we have the ability to communicate our wants, our needs, our fears. And in doing so, that's how we build relationships. And we are human beings that must have relationships in order to be alive. The work that I do is very specific to communication, my communication style. We'll talk about how different coaches have different ways of communicating. I'm very direct. I like people to know I use humor. And so I use communication as a tool for people to know me deeply. And I hope it opens a doorway for them that they get to express themselves in whatever way so that I can know them more intimately. And so great quote. And I, wish for us all to have great communication for as much of our lives as possible.
Let's go there. Let's go deep. Let's go early. Let's go vulnerability. I know that Brene Brown's, you're a huge believer in her work, and it comes out in your work as well.
Yeah.
Share a story that my listeners don't know about you, and something for us to, let's just cut to the chase of something that we don't know about you that perhaps could even immediately connect the audience to, whoa, I want to listen to this interview.
Okay. Wow. No pressure. But I just happened to have gotten off a call with a very good friend of mine. And he was telling me that we were having the conversation about social media, where you look at someone on social media and you think their lives are amazing. I can't tell you how many people tell me, and I post a lot on social media. I'm like an Instagram, for every day, all day. And I had a really tough fall, probably one of the toughest seasons I have had in a very, very, very long time, September, October, November. And I posted my regular pictures, and I remember thinking, I wish that people would check on me. I wish that, me feeling this terrible every day, that, especially my inner circle, but even my outer circle, because I have a lot of connections with a lot of people, that they would ask, like, how are you doing? Do you need anything? Like, I can feel or I can see that there's, something that's disturbing the force. And because we are so good and have become so good at really mirroring only the things that look positive and that we have control over, and sort of owning a narrative that's not necessarily true, it was really eye-opening for me to understand that I was projecting something that wasn't true. Therefore, I wasn't getting what I needed. Therefore, I was consistently in this circle of, pain and confusion and frustration. And I'm challenging myself now based on that, is how do I show up in the job that I have, getting to talk to amazing people like you, getting to be on stage, getting to work with clients, getting to work with organizations, and say, I don't know if we can swear on your podcast, so I'm not going to jump to it.
Go for it.
Things are shitty, and that's okay. And like how to be resilient in shittiness, how to make sure that even though you are maybe at one of the worst states of your life, you are still showing up. You're still a parent. You're still doing your career. You're still being great for your clients. And you're doing it with almost like a handicap, like a hitch in your giddy up. And I think that there is something so powerful about, more powerful even, than everything is great in my life all the time and I figured it out and I have no problems and there's nothing that touches me. Because I can tell you, it does for all of us. It does every day. And so there's a stigma that I am going to challenge myself to break in 2026, starting with me. I had a terrible, terrible last year, especially last half a year, but nobody would have known that. And I think that that's not doing a service to the people that I interact with, back to communication, because I'm leaving out a chunk of the story. I'm leaving out, the meat and potatoes for vegan, like a black bean of material that, again, allows me to connect with other people and connect with potentially a deeper resource, which is something within myself that I can share with others.
What an awesome goal for all of us, just to embrace that. On the flip side, had one of my best years last year in a very long time, right? So thank you. And I did project that out there, but it wasn't like that every day.
Yeah.
Right? And it is a highlight reel. So I think that's the other thing too, isn't it? Just to be realistic and not actually, like, how many people after scrolling feel good about themselves, or I don't know what that statistic would be, but I love the authenticity there, in what you've shared. All right, so let's go into the workplace now, and let's say that a manager, leader is wanting to connect with their team, but perhaps they're oversharing. Perhaps they've gone there too early. Like, how do you coach people to be vulnerable yet keep boundaries in today's workplace?
Vulnerable, but keep boundaries. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a backstory to get into the question, which is to say, I'm doing my PhD at Gonzaga University in leadership studies. And my thesis is around something called the art of learned intelligence, which is a modern look at leadership development through the lens of three pillars: emotional intelligence, relational intelligence, and strategic intelligence. And to the question that you just asked, I think that there is a component where emotional intelligence has been pushed to the back of the room. And we assume if we just diarrhea every single thing that is intimate about ourselves to another person, that's going to build a level of connection. Because as we talked about just a few minutes ago, and I gave the example, everybody will have some sort of grasp of what you're talking about. And therefore they'll say, oh yeah, no, I felt that too. I have some way of, connecting to that really sad or awful story. But what's happening is that you've ignored your intuition, your ability to read a room. And so if you walk into, I work with a lot of engineers, and I could not fathom going into a room of engineers and just sharing the most intimate details of my life, thinking this is what's going to connect me to them. Because I can read the energy in the room and I can see that's not what's going to bridge the gap between me to them. And so I think it's not necessarily so much that they don't know that it's not a good tactic. It is a good tool. It is a good tactic. Sharing is caring, Brene. But you also need to be able to really listen to the energy in a room. And you need to know where to push and where to come back based on what you're getting, what you're being fed from the energy, and usually the non-communication tools or the non-verbal tools, which are how people are showing up. Are they looking at you? Are they looking away? Are they fidgeting? Do they seem very awkward? Does it seem uncomfortable? Stop talking. And so I think that there is a level as well with curiosity, that if you can start an engagement really trying to understand the other person, then you know how far you're willing to go, or you should be going, based on what they give you. And you, as a great coach, mirror your client. Now, I'm a pusher. I'll be very honest. If anyone decides that they want to work with me after this, I'm a little bit of a pusher coach, meaning I just really want to keep digging. I really want to keep understanding the what's next and how is it possible. I have to really know that that's not a quality for everyone and challenge myself to hold a boundary, which is that's not what the person wants or needs. So even if I know it's my best style, I have to still evolve my style, what I want to share, what I want to do, so that it has impact for the other person. And I think for leaders, it's not about what you know, it's not about what you do, it's not about how you feel. It's about how to translate those things so that they are digestible and edible. We should say edible and digestible to the people on their team, to their organization. And if they can't do that, if they can't read that room, if they can't be curious, those are very basic coaching skills that they need to get in a training for. They need to have a coach that can work with them on, because we're not talking about, surgery. We're not talking about something you need to train for 1,000 years. We're talking about very basic skill sets that can change the dynamic for a leader from, oh, that person's really awkward, I'm really uncomfortable, to I love being in a room with them. I love working on projects with them. I would follow this person to any organization that they went to, because that's power. And so it's an ownership. It's an emotional intelligence part of that ownership that I really dig down on in this programming, because we think EQ is not as important as potentially being strategically intelligent and having that ability to, forethink what's going to happen down the line in business. I'll tell you, if you can't motivate people, if you can't work with people, you're not going to do anything in business, because business is still primarily made up of human beings.
Mm. So good, Cara-Lyn, so good. Reminds me of a keynote that I kicked off the National Tooling and Machining Association conference with being net curious rather than networking, rather than it having to feel like work, right? What are the ways that you open up curiosity? And that, I know you and we geek out on deep level listening and in listening to other interviews for you in preparation for today. And I love this idea of push pull, right? As coaches, leaders, managers listening to this, when do you need to pull out that which lives within, and when do you need to push? And the continuum that we live on. And again, I'm just highlighting and reinforcing how good what you just said was, because of that continuum. It's not about you, it's about how you adapt your style in that moment to bring out the best within others. So I just wanted to pick up on a couple of extra things there that you said that really landed with me. So back to this emotional intelligence, relational intelligence, strategic intelligence. Talk to me about how they interact. Let's go there.
Yeah, it's a right question, because I think most people, when they hear these three terms, assume that they go in an order. And even though I do believe we should start with emotional intelligence at the beginning of this cycle, the idea is that we become so fluid in thinking and feeling and acting in each of these three categories that we're doing them almost in tandem. And so they are not individual or siloed components of a leader and a leader's success. They have to work together. And so I encourage leaders to always think, how am I showing up? What is the best way for me to show up? What is the best way for me to connect with others? In that connection of others, how am I motivating them? How am I influencing them? How am I negotiating with them? How am I empowering them? If you then can get a large group of people to stand behind or stand in front of, even if we're talking servant leadership, of a mission and a goal and an objective, that is an extremely strategic tool that you can use in order to get to an end that is going to best serve the team or the organization. If that team has therefore done a great job, you want to congratulate that team. You want to ask them in a retro, hey, how was this for you? You want to get data for that. As they're talking about it, are they mentioning something about you and your leadership? Can you take that and really understand emotionally what that means for you as a leader? Is there a place for you to iterate? Is there a place for you to maybe show up a little bit differently? And in doing so, potentially you are inspiring a different series of stakeholders or employees that normally wouldn't gravitate to you because of your personality. But again, you've been able to maneuver and to, I don't want to say manipulate, but to mold yourself into the best version, as we said, that's going to inspire and motivate a different group of people that can achieve a different bit of something that is strategic. And again, it just moves in this very fluid way where it's not one after the other. It's how am I doing all three categories and what am I thinking about in all three categories as I move through the world. And so creating brand new frameworks in order to build bridges between these, that's something that I'm really excited to work on. I am a history buff, so I'm going to be using a lot of text and ideas from great leaders that we have been able to explore very openly in our research, but also I've been really digging down into female leadership for obvious reasons, and there's not a lot of data on really great leaders that have been females. And so I'm interested in trying to learn for myself, different tools and techniques, because it is a different style of leadership. It is a more feminine energy leadership. And I think that it can be extremely powerful. And I want to be able to incorporate all of that, even to my master's in war studies. I think that there is something really interesting about combining history and a specific style of leadership and figuring out how that can apply to a modern way of looking at leadership, which is almost like in some ways trimming a lot of areas. We're not reinventing the wheel, but we are perfecting individual success through understanding intelligence within ourselves.
Can you give us an example of a war story that's had a direct correlation in how we show up, how we lead? Is there something tangible there that you could go a little deeper for us?
I mean, I could give you I think a really easy one, which I just want to do a shout out to President Barack Obama. We have the same birthday, which is August 4th. So for all the Leos that are listening, I'm big into that. But one of the reasons that I have a lot of literature on him, especially his speech writing in my home, is because his level of storytelling and inspiration through the medium of hope, I think, changed our country. Now, it changed it in a very politically diverse way, but it was very compelling in a lot of different areas based on what he chose to demonstrate as leadership skill. And for him, it was empathy, and for him, it was hope. And he would use storytelling and connection to people as a means of demonstrating his understanding of quality leadership. And for the 8 years that he was president, we watched our country shift and change, and not just certain parts of the country, but the entire country. Now, we've obviously faced the ramifications of his style of leadership in potentially helping to separate the country in ways that we are now seeing are maybe not as beneficial to us as a nation. However, many great leaders, whether that is infamous leaders or, very positive level leading leaders, that's what they do. They create inspiration either to move towards something or move away from something. And my hope, obviously, was that his leadership would inspire that type of empathy and hope and love for each other. And I think that did happen. But I also think what it did is it inspired a lot of the opposite emotions that we are now grappling with and trying to figure out how do we connect with these folks so that we can still try to make progress as a nation, because right now it's looking a little bit dicey. It feels a little bit dicey here. And I think that is just a very modern political representation of what leadership can do, whether, again, you're looking at it from the lens of this was phenomenal and this changed the way that we think in a positive momentum, or if you are looking at it in the exact same way, but saying this is divisive and it's separating our country and creating room for future leaders that will eventually take that same seat to capitalize on that.
So many things in what you just said.
I know.
Let's go with storytelling, because I do believe that is one of the secret weapons that every leader has within them. And what makes a great storyteller makes all the difference. in how they go about that. I love tapping into the senses, for example, when we're storytelling. I don't think enough people do that. If you were with me on that day, you would have smelt this, or you would have heard this, or you would have, this is how I was feeling. And if you were sitting alongside me, the chairs of the lecture theatre were hard and, whatever it might be, right? What do you think makes a great storyteller for people in the workplace that want to connect the vision of the company with say the team's focus, if that makes sense?
Yep. So as I think about it, you have leaders that have sort of a direct line to their employees and their teams that feels a little bit like everyone has blinders on. You're using the vernacular of the company, you're using the values of the company, you're using the objectives of the company. And so suddenly everybody has these, little windows on the side, or not even windows, little walls on the side of their eyes. And they're only looking at the problem or the challenge or the situation from the lens of the corporation. But often what we learn in coaching is something that I learned in CTI, shout out to them, which was my coaching school, which is called balance coaching, which is getting a lot of different perspective is what allows us to be creative and to lean into things that we're not necessarily comfortable with or we don't have experience in as a means of finding a solution. And what I love about storytelling is, and especially the best storytellers, they'll often start and you'll be like, where are they going with this? What does this have to do with X, Y, and Z? And then by the end, they've managed to give like the moral of the story where everybody in the room is going, whoa, I do not know how you went, that far left to come back and to bring us this different perspective that now we're looking at this situation from a completely different part of the world. And in doing so, we're able to see so many different ways of possibility, of opportunity. And so I had a very dear friend to me who was an epic storyteller. And I promise you, every time he sat down, we'd say with kind of fresh blood, somebody that didn't know Larry Leo Leon, he would start with a story and we would die of laughter because we could see on the person's face that they were like, I'm not going to make it. Like, I'm not going to make it through this story. And by the end, he became this beloved person because Larry's skill was to be able to read how a person was feeling and to sort of tell a story that would enhance that feeling and make a person feel very seen. But that's never how it started. That's never how it felt. And I do think that storytelling, it has to be used in a very specific way. Otherwise, it can be a bit of an eye roll. But for those that know how to pull, that moral of the story, almost like Aesop's fables, if anybody remembers what those are, it's just creating a different way to look at a situation that I think allows people to dream, if I'm going to go into that capacity, to be creative, to see it from a different way. And that is where possibility and opportunity really lives. And I often encourage everybody that I work with to risk take. And I use an acronym all the time, which is FAIL, which means frequent adventures in learning, which means make mistakes, try things that are new. You don't know what's going to work until you've tried it, sampled it, tasted it. Even though someone says, don't reinvent the wheel, sometimes you have to reinvent it just a little bit. You just have to make sure that you understand the boundaries of that limitation. So you know how far to push, you know how much to stay in. And so I think with storytelling, there is a way to push the confines of how we think about things so that we get to dream, that we get to be creative. And through that is almost a level of risk taking and fail, that then we are coming out with a solution that is unique and is powerful and is faster and is, more efficient. And all of those things are what companies and leaders are wanting to have. And so the tool that we're asking a lot of leaders to use is not necessarily something that you are taught. It's something that you see in other people, and maybe you're trying to mirror, or you're innately a storyteller. But it is a great quality to encourage in leaders, which is to say, don't look at it directly, look at it from every other side and tell me a story of what that looks like from this perspective over here, and turn your body and now look at it from that perspective over here. And sometimes we used to play with it and get really silly and be like, what does a rainbow think about this situation? What does a sunflower think about this situation? What is a seagull who has just come down and missed catching a fish from the ocean, who's coming back up and is blinded by the sun? What do they think about the solution? Now, obviously, that's very far-fetched. And yet, if you challenge a person to think of a problem going really outside the confines that we've set that situation to be in, you'll find that some sort of aha moment comes to them. And I don't know why that is. That's a lot of probably psychology that I'm going to learn later in my program. But I think it's interesting enough that I encourage leaders to embrace storytelling, and I encourage thinking outside the box from that lesson of storytelling, great
Yeah.
storytelling as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. And environment, environment, environment. Change the
Nine tenths of the
environment
law.
and you change the
Yeah.
perspective. So
Yeah.
don't always have your meetings over Zoom. It's okay to just stick the earphones in and go both be walking in different parts of the
Take a
world
walk.
or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, and pause right now. What do you see? What's in front of you? Someone will say, I see a lamp post. Okay, what can we shine a light on? What
love
haven't
it.
we shined a light on, right now? Is there anything that we haven't seen that if we turn on that, that's how I think it works, from
Mm.
coaching, but they have a term which is dance in the moment. And that is, be right where your client is. And sometimes it's literally physically right where your client is. And so, use all of your senses wherever you are and see how that can play into expanding your thinking, expanding your emotional, relational, or strategic intelligence.
Yeah, so good. So good. All right. In one to a maximum of 3 words, what do you think makes a great coach?
Ooh, I love using, all of the same pieces here. So I'm going to say candid, courageous, and curious. Alliteration. That's what I escaped my mind. The alliteration is candid, curious, and courageous.
The three C's. All right. Feel free to expand on those if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with candid. Again, I have a very specific coaching style. I have a very specific working style, which is to say, I challenge directly and care deeply. And I believe in naming anything that I see or feel almost as soon as I can. Obviously, you wait for that break. And again, dance with the moment with the client. You don't say it exactly in the moment. But if I have a feeling, if I have a sensation, if I have an insight, I'm going to be very candid about it, not necessarily because I'm right or I'm wrong, but to encourage dialogue. And it is my job to be your second set of eyes as your coach, is to be your second set of ears, is to be a second intuition for you. And so, in doing that in the best service I can, I'm going to call it out as candidly as I can, because there is no reason for me to gatekeep what I am seeing and feeling and sensing. That's not what my job is to do. It is to really be a magnifier of the data that you're sharing with me. And so I do this really well in my professional life. And I will tell you, again, going back to this vulnerability piece, I'm not super great at it in my personal life. There's a hesitancy because I don't want to hurt people that I love their feeling by being like, hey, by the way, you suck at that. Like, that's really bad. I can't do that because there is like this emotional component of, I care for you deeply and I don't want to hurt you. And yet, again, challenging myself now, is there a way that I can be as candid as possible that I do in my work with my inner circle, because I know the benefit that it gives. And so finding the way to make it work for that type of relationship, again, we're back into the intelligences here. I think being candid is one of the best things that a coach can do in service of their clients.
Mm. Yep. Love it. Courage.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Listen. Courage is everything to me, actually. I can say that I have a lot of great attributes, but if somebody was talking about me in a room that I wasn't in, I would love if they said that I was courageous, because courage to me means that you are the person who believes it so much that you're willing to do it or to say it, even if no one else is going to stand by you or back you. And I think having that level of awareness, going back to the emotional intelligence, what your values are, what you stand for, what you will not stand for, and be courageous in making those known through declaration and through, action and behaviors. There's probably nothing I admire most or more in another person than watching them demonstrate courage. And I think it's something that if every single person in the world challenged themselves to be even 1% more courageous, because it's usually in the impact of something good. I can't think of a story where I'm like, you were courageous to do something negative. Challenge me here if you have a story that you can think of. But that's not usually how courage works. And so it's about, again, stepping out when there is no landing and going, I have enough faith that it's going to work out because I have faith in me. Again, this is something I want to work on with myself because I can do this in my professional life. I can create big goals. Like we talked about my year last year being really hard. Professionally, it was the best year I had ever had in my entire life. Personally, it was a very hard year. And I think, again, being courageous to tell people about that, that's something where I feel like they're going to judge me. They're going to think I'm maybe not as good in my job, or I'm not a good person because there were things that I couldn't manage, that I couldn't, withstand. And instead, being courageous in this capacity is to say, I'm a human being. You want to share what being human means to you? Or I have this insight. Do you want to share what insight that you have? And it's an invitation. And I really love that, especially for coaches, because that's all you're doing is inviting another person into your perspective, into their own perspective, and to deepen that for them, which, again, it's why our work is so powerful. It's why coaching is so wonderful. And it's that invitation. It's that ask to be courageous with your own self that really, I think, just drives a person's development in any capacity that they want to.
And it's a one thing AI can't take from us as coaches.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yep. Yep. And curiosity being the superpower of the modern leader. It's one of my favorite words in the world.
It's every coach, and I do a lot of coach training. The one that they say all the time is, I'm curious. Can you tell me more? I'm curious. We've almost overused the word curious itself, but I like to liken curiosity to children and their wish to understand how things work. It's almost like the why and the how of everything. And, in coaching, we have a very specific way that we try to ask questions, which is to keep the answer open-ended. Again, we do that because we don't have all the right answers. So if we allow a place for curiosity, if we allow a place for creativity, we will be learning at every conversation, at every interaction, at every single thing that we choose to forward the momentum by being a curious person. And I was not a great critical thinker when I was young. I could memorize anything, but I don't know that I really allowed myself to critically think. And I believe that when I went through the coaching program, one of the gifts that it gave me was that I stopped trying to mimic or memorize the story that a person was going to tell me. And instead, I was curious about how did they get to that story? What is that story doing for them? What is that story going to give them? How is that story going to propel their life along? And so it actually reduces so many negative things in the world. Like I always say, if you know that a person is defensive, rather than meeting them there, just be curious. And I have two children. Literally, one is just turned 8 today, and the other one turned 11 3 days ago. So ask me how my January is going. And I often will say when they are getting in a disagreement and I feel like I'm going to start to lose my temper, like it just really pushes me out of my window of tolerance, I get curious. What happened that made you feel like you have to talk to your sister like that? What was your day like today? What did you have to eat today? How are you feeling overall? What is it like for you since you've gotten home today? I just try to de-escalate the situation by showing I'm interested in you. And we always talk about a great coach. One of the best things that they can do is they're just giving you their attention for whatever time you're working with them. And attention is what we all crave, again, as human beings, whether that's direct attention or indirect attention, but is to be seen, is to be heard, is someone sensing what's going on with us. And so if we are curious about a person, if we're curious about a situation, that means we are giving something or someone our full attention. And that's love. To me, that is an act of love. That is a sign of love. And I heard a Rumi quote the other day, which was, don't do it for love, do it from love. And that just kind of blew my mind a little bit because I think that's what coaching is. We are doing it in service of the other person, not in service of us.
Not what we get out of it,
Yeah.
but what it creates, what environment it creates for people to choose to want to love
Yeah.
and be empowered and all those wonderful things.
Yeah.
Well, look, it's hard to summarize the gold nuggets of this conversation because maybe people, I don't know, I invite my listeners to just even pause this episode right now and maybe write down a few things that really resonated for you as you look at this conversation from a different perspective. So I just invite my listeners on that. And and our season 8 rapid rally. Before we do, big shout out. The only reason we are Cara-Lyn, Giovanniello. Did I say that correctly?
I mean, not as an Italian would, but I mean, I think as an Australian would, and therefore high five from across the world.
I had to double check with my San Fran versus SF. We are going to jump into our rapid rally. Before we do, of course, shout out to our sponsor, trysam.ai. It is how we are both connected. We are both on their platform. We live and breathe and love what they're all about. So it's all about clients finding that perfect match in a coach, and of course the coach taking the marketing out of it for you so we can get busy doing what we love, which is coaching.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Rapid
Great.
Rally season 8, complete the sentence. Cara-Lyn, here we go. Clarity means
Trust and insight.
Connection is
Everything. It's what the world is based on. It is physics. It is what relationships are founded on.
Be intentional because
The decisions that you make are important.
Well, you've heard it right here, right now on the coaching podcast. Cara-Lyn, appreciate you for pushing us and igniting our intuition and making sure that we frequently have adventures in learning. Everybody, F.A.I.L, F-A-I-L, put that above your desk, and let's all think about our war stories as they relate to who's in front of us. The one thing that's resonated me the most probably in this conversation is the energy and the dance of this chat. The dance has it's been wonderful to listen and absorb all the gold nuggets that you have. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been my absolute pleasure.
And thank you everyone for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.